Good morning, Maddie. We continue with stories from Expat Days by Steve Rosse. One of the local tweakers, one of our local meth addicts, came to the door a minute ago, 4:30 in the morning. But he sees the lights are on, and I open the doors at either end of the house in the morning to get a breeze. He sees the lights are on, the doors are open. He wants to bum money. 4:30 in the morning. I guess for him it's 4:30 in the afternoon. He's probably awake all night. All right, here we go. Ghosts on the loose. Oh, I noticed at one point in the last story, I actually call Mem Mem. That's a typo. She was Mem when I was writing all of these. She was Mem in the newspaper. Everybody knew her name. And I switched from first person after 4 years of a weekly first person memoir, 1,000-word column. I had to switch to writing fiction. That's what the previous book was, the last 50 stories, because she got sick and tired of strangers coming up to her in the street on Phuket, saying, "Oh, I know you're Mem Rosse. When you're angry at your husband, you make him curried fish for breakfast." She didn't like having all these people know so much about her. So that was the switch. But in these, I'm still writing about our life together. Ghosts on the Loose. Wheeli and I spent last evening addressing our Christmas cards. I think that the Christmas cards sold in Thailand are ugly and dull. So each year we make our own. We start with a photograph taken at some idyllic spot on Phuket. We make 20 copies of it and tape them to cheap postcards, which we mail out at 9 baht each. This year, we took our holiday picture at one of the great seafood joints on top of the cliff at Promthep Cape. In the photo, we're seated at a rickety bamboo table. We took the shot the week before the King's Cup Regatta, so the bay behind us is full of yachts, 100 or more, each set of sails daubed crimson by the setting sun. On the table, in the photo, in front of us, is a feast of lobster, shrimp, crab, rice, papaya salad, fresh fruit, and beer. Enough food to feed 4 gluttons and their dogs. And again, I don't drink alcohol and never have much. But the editors thought that you're a real Debbie Downer if you say in a newspaper column in Thailand in 1990, this would have been 3, maybe 4, 93, 94. If you say you don't care for alcohol, you're going to alienate a lot of readers. So Steve, pretend you drink alcohol. So, okay, on the table in front of us is a bunch of beer. Enough food to feed 4 gluttons and their dogs. Wheeli is in a silk shirt and a new haircut that she's very proud of, and flashing her Christmas present from me, gold earrings. Think of the most beautiful woman you've ever seen in Asia. Now think of that woman's younger, prettier sister. And that's what Wheeli looks like in the photo. I'm dressed as always in a Hawaiian shirt and a thick layer of sweat. But for that extra touch of Yuletide spirit, I've added a red hat with white trim and a cotton wool beard. Yeah, I used to do these sorts of things. Dress up as Santa Claus for photographs in Thailand. I played Santa at the boathouse. Every Christmas I would dress up And on Christmas Eve, go through the dining room. And Christmas Eve, you're always packed, right? December's high season. And I'd go through the dining room giving out gifts as Santa Claus. Ho, ho, ho. And I did that for the Lions Club a couple years. I dressed up for the Lions Club. I think that was it. By last night, so we're addressing our postcards. Return with me now to those thrilling days of yesteryear. By last night, we had affixed the 20 copies of that snapshot onto 20 postcards, and we were getting ready to mail. We sat at the kitchen table, the coolest spot in the house. That was important because the electricity had gone off again in our village. We were each juggling a flashlight, a pen, and a Chinese paper fan. Ritual is an important part of holiday celebrations, and we have one for the proper addressing of Christmas cards. We start with the stack at Mem's end of the table. She opens my old address book. Where are we? She opens my old address book to the first page and begins calling out names. With each name, I'll say yeah or no. If I say yeah, Weeli will copy the name and address onto the postcard and hand the card over to me. While she calls out more names, I'll add a personal message to the addressee, something warm and heartfelt like, "Season's greetings from the land of smiles. Hope you don't have a coronary shoveling the snow out of your driveway, you poor sap. Ho, ho, ho." Holidays bring out the sentimentalist in me. I'm going to turn the fan a degree or two. Just wait for me. Don't go anywhere. All right. Always in front of the fan, 24 hours a day in front of a fan. I never turn on the air conditioning, but I never turn off the fans. I think I probably bought, 8 or 9 fans in 3 years. So I burn them out. They're not made terribly well in the first place. If truth be told, Weeli takes this whole business of Christmas much more seriously than I do. Many Thais seem fascinated with Christmas, don't they? Though it may just be part of their natural love of holidays in general. In the course of a year, the average Thai will celebrate a long list of national holidays, religious holidays, vegetarian festivals, flower festivals, rice festivals, and the World Cup football competition. They will celebrate the new year no fewer than 3 times. Once with the Chinese calendar in February, once with the old Thai calendar in April, and once with the Farang on January 1st. Since that date marks the traditional opening of tourist season here on Phuket, that celebration takes the place of the Harvest Festival held in the rest of the country. Here, nobody harvests rice. We harvest American Express traveler's checks, which are much easier to pick. Maybe as I get older, I get more sensitive to the passage of time. Or maybe the turning of the years marks mileposts in a transient life. But whatever the reason, starting in mid-December, I become increasingly nostalgic. And I find myself taking unplanned trips down memory lane. It began for me last night, sitting in the kitchen, slapping mosquitoes and hearing Weeli struggle with the alien names of people I haven't seen in years. I began thinking of the folks back home, the ones putting chains on their car tires and comforters on their beds, while I'm taking 5 cold showers a day and spending $20 a month on antifungal talcum powder. But while you're scratching the prickly heat rash on your butt, it's hard to remember the guys with whom you had snowball fights in your childhood, And pretty soon I was thinking of the people who've come and gone from my life since I came out here. The ones met at the odd moment in the odd place, ones to whom I could not send a card if I wanted to. And in the dim glow of the flashlights, strobed up and back across the walls by the flick of our fans, a few of those people actually came walking through our kitchen last night, like Marley's ghost. It's a good thing that Wheelie had her nose buried in the address book, or she might have gotten a fright. First came Dwight, and yeah, these will be people I had met. When you're stuck for a column, for an idea for a column, just tell stories about the people you've met. First came Dwight, all 300 pale, blubbery pounds of him, waddling right across the kitchen, dragging his sample case of dead animal parts behind him. I met Dwight at the VIP lounge at Narita Airport. I was on a 2-hour layover on my way into Bangkok. Dwight was on a 3-hour layover on his way out. We were the only 2 Americans in the room, so protocol dictated that we share a table. Dwight worked in his family's business. He was on one of the 4 business trips he made to Bangkok every year. His company made rawhide chew toys for dogs. And to produce these articles, their factory in New Jersey, where else, needed an enormous supply of beef hides. His father and grandfather had imported the raw material from Argentina for decades. But Dwight, fresh out of Princeton Business School, found that the skins could be purchased for a fraction of the price in Bangkok, where they'd always been disposed of as useless scrap. More important still, to a shy, fat young man like Dwight, Thai businessmen are much more convivial hosts than their Argentine counterparts. So every season, Dwight would fly to Bangkok for a week. He'd spend one day touring the abattoirs with tiger balm under his nostrils, and 6 days being shown the town by Thais who considered him a huge gold egg-laying goose. Imagine paying good money for dried up old buffalo hides. They put him up at the best hotels, took him to the best restaurants, the best bars, the best, For a week, every 3 months, clumsy, fat, pimply Dwight was given the keys to the city of Bangkok, and it never cost him a penny. In fact, he was saving the family business about 50% on their overhead. I realized that the true treasures of Thailand are not hotels or bars or. But I'll never forget how happy Dwight was at Narita. He was. Met him once in my life. Never forgotten the guy, right? Met him for like an hour in an airport. Those are the big meetings, aren't they? Those are the ones that stick with you. After the large specter of Dwight oozed its great self out our back door, as Wheelie was laboring over the spelling of Chappaqua, New York, a thin man with a smile that belonged on a Renaissance saint strolled through from the direction of the living room. He wore orange robes and sandals and a bristle of hair on his head that was a bit longer than you'd expect on a monk, not out of vanity, but forgetfulness. Prat Maha Achan Siripong was my first and best meditation teacher. Before becoming a monk, he'd been an official of high rank in the Thai agriculture ministry, flown all over the world to share his country's rice-growing secrets with other developing nations, and feted by his hosts much the same as Dwight was by his, though the Achan would never brag about it, not when I knew him anyway. He spoke several languages, among them a flawless American, and when he chanted the Dharma, there was enough serenity in the room to lull a stressed out, career-enslaved New York hard case into thinking that not only was nirvana attainable, but that Farang can sit cross-legged on the floor without permanent damage. He'd gone into the clergy to gain merit for his mother. He'd been in his 40s then, married to his career and being groomed for a high position in the Interior Ministry. He planned to be ordained for the traditional 3 months. That was at least 20 and probably closer to 30 years before I met him. He didn't look much over 50 then. One thing, I had come directly from New York after 8 years in New York, came to Phuket, and the editors thought the saying "you're from New York" rather than "I'm from Iowa" would sell better. So in this book, you will notice that I assume a New York persona, which wasn't difficult because when you go a young man into the theater industry in New York City, you want to assimilate. You don't want people to know you've got a BA in theater arts from Iowa. So you talk like this. Hey, what do you want? What are you talking about? Yeah, and I still say coffee. Tim calls me out on it all the time. I still say coffee. You want a cup of coffee? Anyway, yeah, so in this book, I'm from New York. I've grown out of that. His only regret, and he was, I don't think I mentioned this, but he was the abbot at the Thai temple in White Plains, New York, where I would go every week to study meditation, Dharma, and Thai language. His only regret, he once told me, as I was enjoying an after meditation cigarette, was that when he took the vows, he left 10 cartons of imported cigarettes in his apartment. By the time he knew that he'd never go back, the tobacco had grown stale and useless to anyone he might have given them to. He told me once about building a bomb shelter with his brother during World War II in the yard of his family's home in Bangkok. It was a long time after I last saw the Achan that I realized the planes his family needed protection from were American B-29s. The American Air Force killed 4,000 civilians in Bangkok in just 1 month, August of 1944, but the Achan didn't hold a grudge. Yeah, not many Thais are aware of that. It is conveniently not taught in Thai schools or American schools. Yeah, no Americans are aware we bombed the shit out of Thonburi and killed 4,000 civilians, burned them alive, incendiary bombs, burned them alive. Yeah, 4,000 Thais in 1 month. The things we don't teach in school. I was trying to think what to write on the card I send every year to the Potts who fired me for no reason in 1983. The Achan may not hold a grudge, but I do. True. When a scruffy, dirty, hungover Farang in elephant hide sandals and a Hash House Harriers t-shirt tried to raid my refrigerator. This wandering spirit told me, when I met him in Chiang Mai in 1988, that his Thai nickname, Tong Di, which means good gold, was given to him by a monk in a meditation center on the Lao border. I have since learned this is in fact a slang expression employed in some bars that translates more closely to good as gold. A man who has parted from his money with relative ease can be said to be as good as gold already on your wrist. In America, we'd call him money in the bank. Tong Di would only talk in a broken pidgin English. Me go bar, have good time with many Pu Ying, sure. You come, yes? I assured him that as I was an American and he a Canadian, we shared most of a common language. But it did no good. He thought by speaking this way, he would impress the listener as someone who had been in country, a long time, an old station hand, and the biggest expert on things Thai since Constantine Falcon. In truth, he was a roofer. He came to Chiang Mai each year when it got too cold in Vancouver to nail down shingles. He had a method of handling his finances that he touted as the most economical and worry-free scheme. When he arrived, always at the same guest house, he immediately handed over to the manager 10,000 Canadian dollars. This is all true. He kept a little walking around money, but for as long as he was there, he ate all his meals at that guest house, drank all his Mekong there, only went out to the bars to find girls to bring back to the guest house. When he came home with one in a taxi, the driver had to get his money from the desk clerk. Ditto the girl when she left in the morning. True, this is how he lived. He never took a trip to any other part of Thailand. Each year, after about 4 months, a few of the boys from the guest house would come to his room and pack him off, stinking and unwashed, to the airport. And that was how he knew his money was spent, and it was spring in British Columbia. The day I met him, he was complaining that none of the girls wanted to come back to his room for a nooner because of some big festival. He'd spent every winter in Thailand for the last 6 years, and he didn't know what holiday falls on December 5th, the king's birthday. When Weilai asked me, as she does every year, why the pages in the address book for D, J, and M are almost full, while the single page for X, Y, and Z is almost empty, I caught a glimpse over her shoulder of a dark brown girl, painfully thin with huge haunted eyes. That would be Pott, I thought. And you've already heard the story of Pott, but I'm going to tell it again. Sometimes I repeat myself. 250,000 words in print. Sometimes I'm going to repeat myself. 200 hours of YouTube content. Sometimes I'm going to repeat myself. When I met Pott, she was living in a grass shack with no water, electricity, or even a mosquito net, where she dealt drugs to the Farang. She was somewhere in her late 30s, and you could see that before the junk had ravaged her face, she'd been exceptionally beautiful. Another girl who knew that I wrote letters in English for a price brought me to her. Ott wanted something written. She wouldn't tell me what it was until we got a price nailed down, but she warned me there was a lot of it. Yeah, I used to write letters for the girls. Every Falang, I think, who was here for a while used to do that. They didn't have Google Translate on their phones. They weren't communicating through line. It was all on paper with a pen. And you could get paid like 50 baht, 100 baht to write a letter to a girl, to a Falang for a girl. I think David Young wrote a book called The Scribe about a Falang who ends up living that way. He makes his living because he's really, really good at conning the Falang out of money. And so there's the moral quandary. You're screwing your brother white men on behalf of these little brown women, and they're paying you. You're taking advantage of the girls. You're taking advantage of your fellow white men. What is the moral culpability in this situation? The Scribe by David. Don't leave now and go buy it. Wait till you finish this book. So first, Ott wanted to pay me for the translations with drugs, then with sex. An offer made more from habit than any expectation that I would accept. But finally, she agreed to pay cash. Then she produced a cardboard box. In the box were at least 20 notebooks, and each notebook was filled, both sides of every page, with poetry. There were thousands of poems in a neat, careful hand. And I knew immediately that I should have asked for more money. Translating this stuff would be a lot harder than the "Dear Joe, I love your money" stuff that I was used to. She told me, as she filled a bowl with opium, that they were poems to her children, and she really needed them translated into Dutch, but she could only find a Dutch translator who would work from English. I asked her why her kids read Dutch but not Thai, and she ended up having to sit in her hovel all night to get the whole story. Opium slows down a narrative. She'd been a young girl from Nakhon Sawan, new to the game, but not too new, working in a bar in Pattaya. One day, a handsome young man from Holland came into the bar. He was vacationing with his parents, and he'd sneaked out of the hotel to see what his father's friends were snickering about over their continental breakfasts every morning. The first girl he met was Ott. She took the scared young boy back to a small room where he spent the night and too much of his father's money. He managed to sneak back twice more before the family returned to Europe, and Ott thought no more about him until he showed up back in Pattaya a month later. He'd left school, stolen and sold a car to come back to her, and she was very flattered. They lived together in her little room until his father's men found them. There was a scene. He wouldn't come back without her. He was in love, and he wanted to marry her. They offered her money to shake him loose, but she thought she'd like to see Holland. So the boy got his way because his father wanted him back at school. And after enormous amounts of money changed hands behind closed doors in Bangkok and Amsterdam, Ott got to see Holland. She and the boy lived in an apartment near his campus. He went to school and she walked around. She learned the language, or some of it, especially the expression "Godverdammit," which she uses to this day. She learned it the day she announced to father that she was pregnant. After her son was born, mother came to her with some pills and said, "Take one a day and there will be no more children." But Ott thought that was strange. Of course, a man and woman living together would make children. Why not? So she had another, this one a girl, like she wanted. But the boy she met in Pattaya was turning into a man, and not a very good man. He dropped out of school again, this time to sell drugs. Ott tried to make him stop, but she couldn't. Mother and father blamed her, of course, and money must have changed hands downtown again because the police came, and instead of arresting him, they took Ott. She was told at the station to sign a paper, and then she was taken to the airport with just the clothes on her back. Her babies would be fine, they said. They would have toys and good educations and never know their mother was a whore. As soon as the plane touched down in Bangkok, Ott set about trying to get back to Holland. But she was told that as a convicted drug dealer, she'd never get a visa. That's what was on the paper she had signed in Amsterdam, a confession. She tried going back on a fake passport, but she was caught at the desk at Don Mueang Airport, and she ended up in jail for 3 months. Eventually, she came to Phuket, where she said, if they're going to treat me like a drug dealer, I'll deal drugs. She told me, through the tears and the smoke, that her kids would be in their early teens now, and she'd not seen even a picture of them since they were babies. She didn't know if they were alive or dead, and vice versa. She'd written to them countless times, but the only address she had was father's, and she knew what would happen to her letters there. So she eventually stopped writing. But she'd also written these poems, thousands of poems, all for her babies, and she kept them in a box throughout the years, and she asked every Dutch tourist who came to buy drugs if he knew her husband's family. Finally, one said yes, he knew her husband, and he had a current address. She loaded the bowl again and again in that musty hut, and each time the story would slow and seem as if it would stop. But then her eyes would light up again as she thought of her kids, and she'd go on. Maybe if she wrote to her husband, reminded him of the old times in the tiny room back in Pott. Man, maybe he'd give her babies the poems, maybe just a few of the poems. But first, she needed them in Dutch, and that meant first in English. Please, Steve, just a few. The best 20 or 30 poems. I took a few of the poems home with me around dawn, and Eli gave me hell for coming home smelling like an opium den. I tried for a few days to translate them, but they were way out of my league. When I took them back to Pott, I could see the pain in her eyes. Not only had I failed her, but also the Dutch tourist who said he knew her husband had changed his mind and said it was a different fellow after all. He wouldn't give her the address. Godverdammit! I never went back to see Pott again, and now I hear she's in prison. I hope the rain does not disturb this recording. I guess she forgot to pay somebody off. I see that her little hut has been raised to enlarge the parking lot of a new hotel. I don't know whatever happened to all of her poems. Eli and I finally got the last card addressed and stamped just as the lights came back on. Electric lights scare away ghosts, at least until next year. I thought about how I would like to send cards to the ghosts who had stopped by. While Eli took her shower, I sat with my head in the refrigerator trying to get cool. Ghosts in fiction often carry heavy chains, and the rattling and clanking of the chains is supposed to bear ominous warnings to the living, to urge us to reform and repent in the time left to us. My ghosts carried no chains, just a begging bowl, a Mekong bottle, a briefcase full of water buffalo skin, and a cardboard box stuffed with sad poems. I don't know what there is to be learned from the sounds they made, but I'm glad they stopped by, lest old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind. Endings are hard. Endings are hard. I end this with a song about New Year's. It's a Christmas story. Yeah, you know, when does a story become a memoirist to tell? When, if I meet somebody like Dwight in an airport, meet him once in my life for an hour, and he tells me a story about how he makes chew toys for dogs, and he's discovered he can buy them cheap in Bangkok, buy the materials, and they treat him like a king. He goes every 4 times a year, and they treat him like a king, and he has things that he'll never experience in the States. If you had met Dwight, this was a guy destined to be a virgin his whole life. He was very unappealing. Nice guy, for an hour. But I feel like his story is mine because that experience shaped me. Meeting Dwight colors how I look at the commercial sex industry, right? Dwight would be a virgin his whole life if it wasn't for the commercial sex industry. And he was a nice guy. He deserved to get a blowjob like anybody does, And I think that I'm not naming his company. I don't remember his real name, Dwight. I made up the name, or the name of his company. And maybe there's a fat guy in New Jersey who's the president of a dog toy company. And if anybody who knows him ever read this story, they would recognize him in it. But I think the risk of that is very, very small, very, very infinitesimally small. So I consider Dwight's story to be my own. I also consider Dwight and the Achan to be trustworthy witnesses, reliable witnesses, all right? I think that the guy in Chiang Mai, the Canadian roofer in Chiang Mai, and Ott are perhaps unreliable witnesses. I told Ott's story as she told it to me, and again, I think it's my story to tell, and I can't define why. But, and Ott was her real name, yeah. But wherever she is now, I imagine she's dead or in prison. Oh, this is a very sad story. I don't know why I laugh, nervous laughter. But, so Mem and I, we announced we were going to have, we were going to try to get pregnant again. We got pregnant the day we were married. We happened to know because we were celibate for 2 weeks before the wedding and celibate for 2 weeks after the wedding. But the day of the wedding, we took a nap in between ceremonies. Our wedding took all day, from before dawn to long after midnight. And that day, in the middle of the day, we took a nap and we had sex. And then for 2 weeks afterwards, we went on our honeymoon to Chiang Mai with my mother, and she had the room next to ours, and the walls were paper thin, and I was intimidated. I couldn't perform. And so for 2 weeks, we were celibate after our wedding day until my mom went back to the United States. So we knew that we had conceived a child on that day. However, unfortunately, 5 months later, Mem lost that pregnancy. She had a spontaneous abortion or a miscarriage, and in her 5th month. And when we decided that we would try again, we let some people know. And then this ensued when we told some friends that we were going to try to get pregnant again. They say, this is called Can't Buy Me Love. They say you can buy anything in Patong. Yesterday, I drove my complaining Yamaha over the mountain and into Toontown to test the theory. I was looking for a case of Desenex. When you live in the tropics with a delicate complexion like mine, you soon become an expert at skincare. My friend Dick Kaplan, who runs a tattoo parlor on Kata Beach, and as such is the closest thing to a board-certified dermatologist that Phuket can offer, clued me in years ago. In the constant battle against the spotty butt syndrome, a can of Desenex antifungal talcum powder is a man's staunchest ally. Still true. Desenex antifungal talcum powder, it'll clear up those spots on your butt. Unfortunately, yeah, there were no dermatologists on Phuket at that time. There are now, I'm sure there are several. Unfortunately, the local distributor of Desenex has recently discontinued the product. I stood in line behind a bunch of puffed up iron pumpers buying their syringes and steroids at my usual source in Phuket town, only to learn that the last can had been sold the day before to some poor guy who spent too long sitting on a hot motorcycle seat in a pair of wet bathing trunks. I then followed a lead on a fresh case of the stuff reputed to be in some pharmacy on Stooge Beach. I parked my motorcycle in front of the Maison de Casa house on Soi Bangla and began a foot tour of the 1,000,001 convenience stores, druggists, and VD clinics that Nakhon Gomorrah has to offer. I never did find my trusty friend in the yellow can, and eventually I had to make do with Caldazine, and also ran in a pink bottle that any self-respecting male is embarrassed to be seen buying. But when you weigh the shame of purchasing a pink container with a cute ducky on the label in a store where nobody knows you, against the mortification of being caught scratching your buttocks at a shishi cocktail party attended by Phuket's business elite, You buy the stuff and you ask them to double bag it. While on my quest, it was made obvious to me that capitalism is alive and well on Patsy Beach. Though the high season feeding frenzy is 3 months in the future or 3 months past, there are still plenty of sharks in the water, and the lack of bait fish this time of year only makes the carnivores more aggressive. As I danced across the shattered paving stones from clinic to clinic, I was offered leather belts from Bali and fake Rolexes from Beijing. I could have bought a bonsai tree from Kyoto, a gibbon from Songkla, or an hour-long seminar on stress management techniques with a girl from Ubon Ratchathani who bragged of being double-jointed. On sale were t-shirts and toys and trips to Trang, kites and kittens and cutlery, batik and booze and bangle bracelets, lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. I watched a Taiwanese couple buy 1,000 baht worth of lottery tickets for a drawing that had been held 4 days previously. I watched a Danish woman buy a beautiful antique seated Buddha that would never make it past the customs desk at the airport. She paid more for it than I pay for rent in a year. I watched an Arabic man have his picture taken on board a baby elephant that was suffering a really oppressive case of diarrhea. Every 3 steps, somebody tugged at my sleeve and said, you, what you want? A fellow in dreadlocks and a t-shirt with the Pan-African flag on it said, I'm on in these times. Praise Jah, and what you be wanting, brother man? I asked the wannabe Rasta if he knew who Haile Selassie was. And he said, Jah man, played congas with the whalers, didn't he? Then he broke into Southern Thai dialect and told me about his mother's house in Pathalung. Finally, a guy I'd never met before and wouldn't recognize if I ever saw him again took me to a place I'd never been before and couldn't find again if I had to. The reasons for my amnesia will become obvious. This guy, who, as I said, I'd never met before and would not recognize if I ever saw him again, say in a police lineup, happened to know that Wilai and I are trying to start a family. He thought we might be interested in a shortcut. He took me to a place somewhere on the slopes of the mountain, in that no man's land where Patong sputters out into clapboard huts on stilts that never appear on any Thai Tourism Authority brochures. We scrambled our way up a muddy path that must be a waterfall when it rains to a tiny wooden house built from timber that was once the construction scaffolding around a 5-star resort. The mosquito net over the thin mattress on the floor looked more substantial than the walls of the room. Inside were 2 women, one old, very old, one young, very young. The old woman was boiling a handful of rice over a charcoal fire laid on cinder blocks just outside the door, and the young woman was squatting on her hunches in a corner, staring off into space. The whole time I was there, she never moved or spoke or even looked at me. On the soggy mattress, under one of those plastic mesh domes with which upcountry folk cover their leftover food, was a baby. It was a baby girl, about 4 months old and with the palest white skin I've ever seen. She had little wisps of golden hair and bits of string tied around both wrists and nothing else to cover her up. Grandma left the cooking fire to show the baby off to me. She never cries, the old woman said in very clear, very slow Bangkok Thai. She spoke without slang and watched my eyes to make sure that I understood exactly what was going on. We have no milk to feed her. We're afraid she'll starve. Normally, houses with new babies resemble trailer parks after a tornado. Bits and pieces of infant care equipment scattered everywhere. Bottles, rattles, diaper bags, Kleenex boxes, and stained miniature clothing. This place, this room, was bare, except for a few movie magazines and some cosmetics. "Where's the father?" I asked. "Gone," said Granny. "Bailao." "But don't worry, he doesn't even know about the baby. No problem there." "What was his nationality?" She gave me an appraising look, and with a practiced eye, she ventured, "British?" "American," I said. "Right, American. The baby's father was American." She smiled at me with black beetle nut teeth, which you don't see anymore, bouncing the baby on her knee to make it laugh. The importance of an effective sales display cannot be overestimated. "Just 15,000 baht," she said. "Cheap, nah?" "Toop, not my paying, nah?" "Yeah," I said, "really cheap." She was selling the baby for less than $400, or about 1/4 of 1 month's rent on my old apartment in Manhattan. She put the baby on my lap, and I sat with her for a few more minutes, and the crone invited me to supper. The young woman sat in the corner the whole time, silently. I declined the invitation to join them for dinner, and I beat it out of there. Outside, my guide said, "Na song san na." This means pitiful, right? And I had to agree. When I got home, I didn't tell Wee Lai what I'd seen. She's been burning so much incense at our house altar that praying for a baby. Let me start over. She's been burning so much incense at our house altar, praying for a baby, that the place smells like St. Patrick's Cathedral. But I thought about the kid as I took my shower and dusted on my caldazine, counting the new spots on my butt in the mirror and remembering the number to bet on the lottery. I can't figure out if buying a child like that would be an act of mercy or white slavery. There's a line in the movie Casablanca where Bogart says, "I don't buy and sell human beings." And Sidney Greenstreet replies, "Too bad, that's our leading commodity here." The same is certainly true in Patong, though the agricultural metaphor falls apart when you consider that most commodities are allowed to ripen on the vine before being taken to market. Yeah. Boy was his name, the kid who took me to see the baby that was for sale. And I suppose that baby, if still alive, yeah, she'd be like 40 years old now. What do we think? 95, say? Math, I suck at math. 95 to 2005, 2015, 2025. She'd be 30. That little girl, that little blonde girl, little blonde white Lu Kung would be 30 now. I hope she's 30. I hope she was adopted by somebody and taken care of. I don't want to read for too much longer. This is a short one and a more lighthearted one. I don't want to end on a note of selling human beings. This is called The Women. The weekly bruncheon meeting of the Phuket Public Relations Sisterhood has just been called to order in my living room. My wife, Wee Lai, acts as chairperson, while her cohort eats kanom din, leafs through Victoria's Secret catalogs, and dishes the dirt on whoever didn't show up this week. I listen from my office, where I am banished on these Saturday mornings, made superfluous by my masculinity. I was a public relations manager too. I could have been invited to the public relations sisterhood bruncheons, but I never was. I was banished to my office. I hear Wheelie telling the gang how one of the waitresses at her hotel saved a tourist from drowning this week. The unlucky drunk had decided to take a midnight swim, and a 19-year-old girl from Trang spotted him floating face down as she passed the pool at the end of her shift. Nobody raised in Trang has ever known how to swim, but this girl used a deck chair cushion to keep afloat while she pulled the drowning Phalang into shallow water. The members of the sisterhood murmur praise for the girl, and my wife uses the words Puklahan. She's a real hero, says Vilai. As they turn to other topics, I'm left with that word, Puklahan, ringing in my ears. The book I was reading, forgotten on my lap. Wheelie and I got married one bright January morning at Wat Get Ho, north of Phuket town, and we went directly from there to lay a wreath at the Heroines Monument. The statue was already well adorned with hundreds of other offerings. Nobody on Phuket would think of starting a new business, a new marriage, or a new baby without first paying respect to Chan and Muk, the heroines. Their statue dominates a traffic circle on the main road from Phang and the cover of every guide to Phuket ever published. They are depicted in bronze at double life size, posing as they must have appeared on the eve of the big battle with the Burmese in 1785. They stand with feet firmly placed, wearing men's jackets and severe haircuts. Swords are in their right hands, and their breasts are bound so as not to impede a drawn bowstring. They wear no jewelry, and I imagine no makeup. With most of the able-bodied men of the island already dead or fled, the two noble women were left to defend the walled city from the pillage-minded Burmese with a ragtag army of old men, women, and children. In a wonderful bit of stereotypically female guile, they ordered that palm fronds be cut from the trees, stripped of their leaves, and painted black. Their home guard, dressed in armor and holding these sticks, faced the invaders from the walls. Through a spyglass from the Burmese lines, it appeared that the town was defended by hundreds of men armed with muskets. The Burmese turned their elephants around and started the long march home. Chan and Mook were given the titles of Tao Tepkasatri and Tao Sisunton by King Rama I. And sometime later, they got their statue, which is at the intersection of the traffic circle at the intersection of Tepkasatri Road and Sisunton Road. They've named the two main roads, one east-west, one north-south, on the island after the two heroines and put their statue right at the intersection of those roads. But in the 200 years since they pulled off their hoax on the Burmese, Phuket has changed. At the moment, Phuket floats on a sea of foreign currency, and it's the hotels that keep the tide up. John McGee, 10 years ago when this book was published, told me, no, it's not the hotels now, it's property. Selling condos and villas, that's what keeps Phuket afloat. But it is still the women doing the selling. Yeah, women are much more successful at selling homes than men, at least in Thailand, at least on Phuket. Or so John told me. I don't know. I've never bought a home here. And who keeps the hotels going? Ask anyone who works in one and they'll tell you it's women. That's who. Women comprise 70% of the workforce in the hotels. And any department head will testify that women make better employees than men. They're cleaner, better mannered, and less likely to steal or report absent. They are represented at every level on the organizational charts, with the glaring exception of general manager. One major hotel on Phuket has a female GM, but that's only because she owns the joint. It was on Patong Beach. I forget the name of that resort. But yeah, the Thai Hotels Association, all the GMs would meet and there'd be one woman in the room. Women make the decisions, and I think this is true of Thai society at large. Women make the decisions. They do the books, they write the brochures, they cook the food, and they clean the rooms. They are the ones whose smiles the tourists remember on the plane going home. And they are the ones who suffer the constant unwelcome attention of male guests. They are the ones who explain the house rules politely whenever a guest brings a joiner back to the hotel. The heroines of today's Phuket wear tailored business suits instead of armor, or drab uniforms that they're not allowed to dress up with accessories. They can guide a lecherous Australian VIP through the scenic spots for 2 days, dodging gropes and pinches and innuendo all the way. Or they can balance a tray of drinks that weighs more than they do through a crowded lounge and serve from that tray, crouched gracefully at the feet of some bloated duchess. They watch men with less ability and experience get promoted past them, and they live in fear of the unfounded jealousy of the GM's wife. Many of them are lucrân. A 20-year-old can make $30,000 a month plus service charge, perks, and benefits if she can speak German, French, Japanese, or Patagonian. And it doesn't matter where she went to school or where her parents met each other. On the pages of the local Thai press, photos of Miss Noi dressed in a skirt greeting VIP guests in the lobby of a big hotel are edging out the photos of Miss Noi dressed in a bikini greeting VIP guests at the marble bar of the Mons Veneris coffee shop. But as far as I know, there is yet to be so much as a plaque dedicated to the women of the hotel industry on Phuket, let alone a martial statue. Maybe I'll go down to the living room and suggest that the Phuket Public Relations Sisterhood could take up a collection to build a statue. I see it as a pair of bronze figures, double life size, a roommate and an executive secretary, one armed with a vacuum cleaner and the other with a cell phone, smiling bravely at advancing hordes of packaged tourists. I'd put it on a marble plinth in the traffic circle downtown, where it could be seen from the lipstick counter at Ocean Department Store. Because every woman, that was where you bought lipstick, that one place on Phuket. If you're a woman, or so my wife told me, you bought your lipstick at Ocean Department Store. All right, that's an hour. Gonna go start my day. Not that this day will be any different from any other day, and that is by design. All right, dude, take it easy. I hope you're enjoying these. Talk to you later.